It's London in the 1920s, and this is about a very particular murder that even up until today has been seen as a miscarriage of justice for one of those involved. It all has humble beginnings, with a woman meeting a man, both falling in love, getting married in the belief that they will live happily ever after. But life sometimes is not like that, and for whatever reason, the wife falls for another man, and they want to be together permanently, despite the obvious matter of the spurned husband. The solution on the face of it, at least to them, is simple. In order to get the aforementioned partner out of the way, by killing him and get that inconsequence sorted out. It was perhaps too obvious from the police perspective, as they were apprehended after a brief investigation with the resources that were available at the time. Surely it was an open and shut case of cold-hearted murder. But was the evidence presented at the trial and laid bare to the court entirely correct, or was there a miscarriage of justice with the eventual verdict? On the 3rd of October 1922, husband and wife Edith and Percy Thompson went to see a performance at the Criterion Theatre in London, together with the Laxtons, Edith's uncle and aunt. They left the theatre together around 11 p.m. and went to Piccadilly Circus tube station, where the two couples went their separate ways. The Thompsons caught the 11:30 p.m. train to Ilford. Arriving near to their home, they walked along Belgrave Road between De Vere and Ensley Gardens. Unexpectedly, a man jumped out from behind a hedge near where they lived and aggressively confronted Percy. After a violent struggle, during which Edith was knocked to the ground, Percy was stabbed several times and was fatally wounded, and he died before Edith could summon help. The attacker had fled. Neighbours later reported hearing a woman screaming hysterically and shouting, oh don't," several times. By the time the police arrived, Edith was inconsolable. At the police station the following day, she was still distressed. She was also unaware that a friend of the couple, Fred Bywaters, was already a suspect. He was arrested that evening and taken to Ilford police station, where Edith was confronted with him. One of the inspectors, Frank Hall, untruthfully told her that Bywaters had already confessed to the murder, whereby Edith then admitted to the police that she knew who the assailant was and provided details of her association with Bywaters. The police widened their investigation and discovered a series of more than 60 love letters from Edith to Bywaters. The letters were the only tangible evidence linking her to the killer. At Stratford Magistrates Court a couple of days later, her defence argued that the letters did not connect Mrs. Thompson to the place or manner of the murder, as they did not allow for consideration of common purpose, namely, that if two people agree to achieve the death of a third, and one of those people acts on the expressed intentions of both are equally guilty. The presiding magistrate decided that the letters should be admitted into evidence, and that the court at the Old Bailey would rule on it again. Edith Thompson and Frederick Bywaters were each committed for trial, having been charged with the murder of Percy Thompson, Edith's husband. What events conspired for these three individuals to come together, with one of them having a terrible end? Edith was born on Christmas Day 1893 at 97 Norfolk Road in Dalston, London, and was the eldest of 5 children, of William Graydon, who was a clerk with the Imperial Tobacco Company, and his wife Ethel. During her childhood, Edith was a happy, talented girl who excelled at dancing and acting, and was good at school with a natural ability for maths. After leaving age 15, she joined a firm of clothing manufacturers near Aldgate Station in London. In 1909, at the age of 15, Edith met Percy Thompson, a shipping clerk, who was 3 years her senior. In 1911, she got a job at wholesale milliners Carlton and Pryor in the Barbican. She quickly established a reputation as a stylish and intelligent woman, and was promoted by the company several times, until she became their chief buyer and made regular trips to Paris in the course of her job. After a 6-year engagement, Edith and Percy were married at St Barnabas Church in Manor Park on the 15th of January 1916. They bought a house at 41 Kensington Gardens in the then fashionable London suburb of Ilford in July 1920. With both their careers flourishing, they lived a comfortable life. In 1920, the couple became acquainted with 18-year-old Frederick Bywaters, who was a merchant seaman. Although he and Edith had met 9 years earlier, when Bywaters, then aged 9, had been a schoolfriend of Edith's younger brothers. The 26-year-old Edith was immediately attracted to Bywaters, who was handsome and impulsive, and whose stories of his travels around the world excited Edith's love for romantic adventure. To her, the youthful Bywaters represented her romantic ideal. By comparison, 29-year-old Percy seemed staid and conventional, being oblivious to the emerging romantic attraction between his wife and Bywaters. The three of them were joined by Edith's sister Avis as they holidayed in Shanklin on the Isle of Wight in June 1921. On their return to London, Percy invited Bywaters to lodge with them. While on holiday, Edith and Bywaters began an affair. Initially, Percy was unaware of this, although he gradually noticed his wife was drifting away from him. Matters came to a head barely a month after it started. A trivial incident in the Thompsons' garden triggered a violent row during which Percy hit his wife and caused her to fall over some furniture. Bywaters intervened, and Percy ordered him out of the house. The Thompsons' sitting tenant, Mrs. Lester, mentioned Edith's bruises in one of her statements to the police. From September 1921, for the next 12 months, Bywaters was at sea, and during this time, Edith wrote to him frequently. After his return, they met up again on numerous occasions. The trial began on the 6th of December 1922 at the Old Bailey. Bywaters had cooperated completely and had led police to the murder weapon he concealed after the murder, and consistently maintained that he had acted without Edith's knowledge. Her love letters were produced by the prosecution as evidence of incitement to murder. They dated from November 1921 to the end of September 1922 and ran to over 55,000 words and afford a day-to-day account of her life in London when her lover was at sea. In some of these letters, she writes about her longing to be free of her husband. Edith's counsel urged her not to testify, warning her of the danger she could be putting herself in, and stressing that the burden of proof lay with the prosecution, and that there was nothing they could prove other than she had been present at the murder. But she rejected his advice. She was determined to give evidence, imagining that she could save Bywaters. It was a mistake. She made a poor impression on the judge and the jury, particularly when she repeatedly contradicted herself. She had claimed that she had never attempted to poison her husband, and references in her letters to attempting to kill him were merely attempts to impress her lover. In answer to several questions relating to the meaning of some of the passages in her letters, she simply said, "I've no idea." Bywaters maintained that Edith had known nothing of his plans, nor could she, he claimed, as he had not intended to murder her husband, but only to confront him and discuss the matter of the affair. Apparently, when Percy threatened to shoot him, Bywaters lost his temper. Edith, he repeatedly claimed, had made no suggestion to him to kill Percy, nor did she know that Bywaters intended to be there. In discussing the letters, Bywaters said that he had never believed Edith had attempted to harm her husband, but that he did believe she had a vivid imagination, which was fueled by the pulp fiction novels she enjoyed reading. He felt that in her letters she viewed herself in some way as one of the fictional characters she had read about. There was never any evidence that Edith knew that Bywaters was going to attack her husband on that night or any other, nor is it clear why he chose to act in that way. Yet she had wanted to get rid of her husband, and her husband was now dead. Her letters contained references to potions, which she refused to explain. The judge and the police thought she was culpable. One juror declared Mrs. Thompson's letters were her own condemnation. Nauseous is hardly strong enough to describe their contents. In the summer of 1922, Edith had posted 24 letters to Bywaters on board his ship. When he was in London, she sent telegrams and notes written between their meetings. Writing about their love affair to her became as an important part of having it. In February 1922, she sent her lover a cutting from the Daily Sketch about the death of the Reverend Horace Balding from poisoning. The Reverend's wife had been having an affair with her lodger, noting that Bywaters may find this of interest. In April, she reports that she had slipped quinine into her husband's tea and, since he has complained of the bitter taste, is now going to try ground glass. "I've got an electric light globe this time," she wrote. It is believed that during the time of her love affair with Bywaters, thoughts of murder formed only a tiny and fantastical fraction of Edith's considerations. But the wildness, near stupidity of her supposed plots might have given the judge and jury pause for thought. On the 11th of December, the jury returned a verdict of guilty against both defendants. Both were sentenced to death by hanging. Edith became hysterical and started screaming in the court, while Bywaters loudly protested her innocence, shouting, "I say the verdict of the jury is wrong. Edith Thompson is not guilty." Before and during the trial, the two accused were the subjects of highly sensationalist and critical media commentary, but after they were sentenced to death, there was a dramatic shift in public attitudes and in the media coverage. Bywaters in particular attracted admiration for his fierce loyalty and protectiveness towards Edith, but she was widely regarded as the controlling mind that had set it all up. Despite the petition and a new confession from Bywaters, in which he once again declared Thompson to be completely innocent, the Home Secretary refused a reprieve. A few days before their executions, Edith was told that the exact date and time had been fixed, at which point she lost her composure. She spent the last few days of her life in a state of near hysteria, crying, screaming, moaning, and unable to eat, a telegram was sent to the king by Edith's mother on the 7th of January 1923, which read, "To His Majesty the King, Buckingham Palace. May I humbly beseech your Majesty, as a last resort, to exercise your royal prerogative of mercy towards my daughter, Mrs. Thompson, now under sentence of death. I am broken-hearted at the terrible injustice of her sentence, caused entirely by prejudice." There is no reply. A few days after her 29th birthday, Edith learned that a petition seeking commutation of the sentence, signed by over 1 million people, that had been sent to the Home Secretary, had been refused. Her hair went grey, and she had to be continually dosed with morphia. On the 9th of January 1923, in Holloway Prison, Edith collapsed in terror at the prospect of her hanging. Heavily sedated, moaning and almost unconscious, she was carried to the gallows by 4 prison warders. In Pentonville Prison, the 20-year-old Bywaters, who had tried since his arrest to save Thompson from imprisonment and execution, was himself hanged. The ordeal of executing Edith had a profound effect on her hangman, John Ellis. According to the governor, they hanged a practically unconscious woman. The 2 executions happened simultaneously at 9 a.m., only about half a mile apart. Holloway and Pentonville prisons, respectively for women and men, are very close together in North London. Over the years, there have been critics of the case and the trial, with the way it was conducted. Edith was found guilty of aiding and abetting the murder of her husband Percy by her young lover Frederick Bywaters. The case against her was weak in law from the outset, and the judgment passed down at the Old Bailey is now seen almost universally as unjust. In the view of her counsel, Sir Henry Curtis Bennet, she was put to death for adultery, not murder. The prosecution had only used a selection of Edith's letters in court to generate a climate of prejudice against her as an immoral adulteress who seduced a young man 8 years her junior. Despite the fact that there is no evidence of any kind in the letters that Edith knew that her husband would be attacked that night, in that particular place, and in that way. The prosecution, in their opening address to the jury, stated that there is the undoubted evidence in the letters that there was a pre-concocted meeting between the accused and the victim. As only half of Edith's correspondence was submitted in court, the jury may well have been led to believe that a reference to the place, time, and the manner occurred in one of the letters withheld from them. The jury was also influenced by the judge's openly expressed disgust concerning the immorality of the correspondence is on record. The judge did in fact instruct the jury to find Edith guilty only if they were convinced that she had lured her husband to the place where he was murdered by saying, "Now I'm going to ask you to consider only one question in your deliberations, and that is, was it an arranged thing between the woman and the man? If you think that when she saw Bywaters there that evening, he came under her direction, and that she had given him as to where she would be about that time, and there was to be a murder, then she is guilty of murder too." The judge, turning to Edith's letters, only focused on the ones referring to poison and ground glass, directing the jury to look at these words. He failed to acknowledge that this point had been tackled head-on by the defence, as well as it was not self-evident proof of intent to murder, emphasising the fact that this was not a charge that was being tried. In his closing comments, Mr. Justice Sherman, the judge, impugned the integrity of the important witness John Webber, whose house was close to the scene of the murder. According to the judge, it was a very curious piece of evidence. If Webber could be trusted to tell the truth, then there was corroborative proof of Edith Thompson's spontaneous panic and hysteria during the fight and stabbing. The judge directed the jury, "You know that Webber lives somewhere away from the crime scene. I'm not saying it is true. It is for you to say whether it is accurate, or whether it was imaginary, or whether he made a mistake." Such direct undermining of a bona fide witness chimed with the judge's evident hostility towards Edith. His wider anti-feminist bias at the trial was evident and extensively commented on by the press at the time. He consistently referred to the jury as gentlemen, despite the fact that it included a woman. Sir Henry Curtis Bennett, KC, the defence barrister, later claimed that he could have saved Edith had she not rejected his advice not to take to the witness stand. His failure to secure acquittal had affected him deeply. He maintained her innocence of murder throughout his life, claiming that Edith paid the extreme penalty for her immorality. He told a journalist that he had a perfect answer to everything, which he was sure would have won an acquittal if she had not been a witness. She was a vain woman, and an obstinate one. She realized the enormous public interest and decided to play it up by entering the witness box, he said. James Douglas, the chief reporter for Express newspapers covering the trial, also took issue with the verdict, writing, "I think the hanging of Mrs. Thompson is a miscarriage of mercy and justice. I believe she was an adulteress, but we do not hang a woman for adultery. Our law punishes adultery by divorce, not by death. If Mrs. Thompson had not been walking with her husband when he was murdered, would the jury have found her guilty of wilful murder? Why should she be hanged by reason of what may have been the unforeseen accident of her presence?" In January 2023, an application for a posthumous pardon for Edith, using the royal prerogative of mercy, was considered by the Ministry of Justice. The application, made on behalf of Edith's heir, Rene Weiss, had initially been rejected in 2022 by the then Justice Secretary. On the 6th of March 2023, the Secretary of State for Justice referred the application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission as a potential miscarriage of justice. The review panel found that while her trial may not now be considered fair, there was no new evidence available. Releasing its findings nearly a year later, the CCRC concluded the case was not made out for the granting of a royal pardon. The panel stated that while by modern standards of fairness, the use of the letters as evidence may have been ruled inadmissible by the trial court, and the judge's summing up lacked fairness and impartiality, there was no new evidence to clear Edith, and the case was not abnormal enough. The CCRC did note that the trial was exceptional, given the prejudice Edith had faced from the judge and the prosecution. As was normal practice after an execution, the bodies of Edith Thompson and Frederick Bywaters were buried in unmarked graves within the walls of the prisons in which they had been executed. In 1971, Holloway Prison underwent an extensive program of rebuilding, during which the bodies of all the executed women were exhumed for reburial outside the confines of the prison. With the exception of Ruth Ellis, the remains of the women, Edith Thompson, Stylu Christophe, Amelia Sack, and Annie Walters, were reburied in a single grave at Brockwood Cemetery in Surrey. Subsequently, on the 22nd of November 2018, Edith's remains were exhumed and formally buried alongside her parents, in accordance with her mother's wishes, in the City of London cemetery.